Well, sometimes I get lost with all the details. One of the things I did want to elaborate on from the last part was my comparison between cable television, because everything is cable television nowadays, and the highway system where you have to buy your own car, you have to buy, you have to pay for the road and plowing and so on and so forth, salt and for the wintertime. Well, it's similar with the cable television, except cable television is supposedly a private enterprise. So they own the cable, which you have to pay for. So they put the cable into your house, they rivet it to your siding and all of this stuff so that it's like semi-permanent. They claim a right to come in and check their property on your property without any sort of announcement or anything like that. Government doesn't do anything about it. And then you pay for this whole thing through subscription prices, which accounts for their profit. So they make a profit on all of this business. And on top of it all, after you buy the television, pay for the cable, pay for the services, you get like hundreds of channels that are all the same thing. And they're all like commercials, 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 which you pay for the whole thing. And it's still not what you want to watch. If you want to watch nude women, you have to pay, I don't know, $6 or $10 or something like that. There's no regular stations. Like, why can't they just have Playboy Station on or something like that? It's been around since the 1980s. So what you have that you're paying for is essentially a highly censored arrangement. And I get maybe one or two channels that I could even stand watching. I don't want to get into the details of it. But one of the stations that I do watch is RT. And I've just recently started watching it, and it sort of dovetails in what I was saying here about this on the last part with banking and so on and so forth. Wait a second. These guys that were on there, they had three economists, and they were all complaining about Deutsche Bank because they were saying that Deutsche Bank acts like a central bank, and that central banks are improper vehicles for the Keynesian New Deal form of economy. And I thought that was really astounding because it's exactly what got us into this mess in the first place. You know, when you have a gold standard and you overtrade, you have trade losses with other countries, the accounts that you have that are held in gold become transferred to that other country. And the immediate result of that is that you have a decrease in your money supply. So you will have what they refer to now as a recession or whatever. And that's always been like that in the United States. You always had that sort of situation. Part of the problem that we have today, and I have to agree with the GOP on this, they're absolutely 100% correct. It is a debt problem. All of these things that you're seeing in these foreign countries is all because of debt. And the way that that debt occurred primarily in the United States is because people overtraded. They created trade losses with various entities. And as a result of that, gold transfers were, they had to be transferred to other people's account. When Kennedy was elected president, this was a big issue. He was going to maintain the value of the dollar, or however they computed it then, an ounce of gold, an ounce of monetized gold was $35 an ounce. He was going to maintain that. And they referred to it as the gold leakage issue or something. And all that it meant really was that the United States, various people collectively in the United States, owed money to other people that they traded with. So if they had paid the money, it would decrease the money supply. But the conflict that was created is when the New Deal occurred, as Mariner Eccles, and once the head of the Federal Reserve, said that the Federal Reserve is merely acting as an engine of inflation. In other words, they just keep cranking out dollars. And that's really the gist of the entire problem that all of these countries have now, is that people can't maintain their standard of living without being in debt, without increasing the size of debt. Well, that was automatically adjusted in the terms of trade when you had a fixed value to dollar. A fixed value to dollar, you had a fixed amount of money. It was limited. When you got to the end of that, that was it. The economic growth stopped. And when it stopped, everything became adjusted to that. And it was fine. You know, there were poor people, just like there are poor people now. And you had problems that were possibly far worse in some regards. But as far as the actual monetary issue went, as far as inflation went and things like that, it was adjusted. So it went back to, the beginning. And and as a result of that, there was really no national debt to speak of. And there was no trade imbalance to speak of, all the way up until the time of World War II. And it wasn't until the United States started lowering tariffs and things like that, and maintaining a forever increasing money supply, that we got into these debt problems. It never was worse than when Reagan was president. Everybody used to kid around when he was president. They'd say that, he's really a closet Keynesian. And all the Republicans have been like that so far. They have different priorities of what they spend the money on, but they spend just as much, if not more, than the Democrats do. It's all just good cop, bad cop. But it is an important thing to keep in mind with all of this, because no matter what you do, no matter what solution you try to come up with, your resources are always going to be limited. That's what economics is all about. So on the one hand, you have these people that are trying to dream up of ways whereby you could forever increase the money supply without any sort of adverse consequences occurring. I don't believe that could be done. Other people do believe it could be done, but it's kind of like what Keynes said. They asked him, is this going to work? Yeah, it's going to work in the intermediate term. Well, what happens in the long term? We're dead. And if you stop and think about that, most of these guys that were alive when the national debt was less than $1 trillion when Reagan took office, and now it's $14 trillion. A lot of those guys are dead. I can't remember what it was, when Reagan left office. I think maybe it was like $5 trillion or something like that, But that is where all of that really just, they more or less just said to hell with it. We don't give a shit. It's like we got nukes. If somebody fucks with us, we just nuke them. And that is a big problem. So, where these people are saying, well, the problem is that we can't prime the pump, okay? And austerity is not the proper thing to do. We have to prime the pump, but we don't have the resources to do it, which is true. They don't have the resources to do that. The only way that they could do it is to have high rates of inflation, to inflate the debt away. And they're probably going to do that. They're probably doing it now. They're hiding it or masking it some way. But it's an important consideration, because personally myself, if I was ever in a position where I was in the government, if I was the president or secretary of treasury or something like that, I would not be in agreement with these guys that are saying that Deutsche Bank is doing the wrong thing, or that, you know, that it's wrong to have high reserve rates and a limited money supply, and that when you overtrade, your debts have to be paid. It's really mind-boggling to me, because the Democratic Party, now all of these people that are taking this populist view, you know, they're against the Jew bankers and all of this stuff, you know, which is essentially the view of Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson opposed the First National Bank. It was a merchant leech conspiracy, so on and so forth. He wanted to have the Treasury control currency, and which is what a lot of these people are saying right now. You know, they were known as hard money Democrats. Woodrow Wilson, one of the things that he says is people, debts must be paid. You know, he was such a fanatic about it that all of these reparations that they placed on Germany, most people blame that for the rise of Adolf Hitler. That, you know, the only way that they were able to pay off their debts was to inflate their currency. People were carrying wheelbarrows to buy a dozen eggs. A wheelbarrow full of currency to buy a dozen eggs. That's how bad it was, you know. So in many ways, a lot of this doesn't make any sense, because it went from one extreme to the other extreme, you know. And it's like the only alternative that exists at the present time are the Republicans that are saying, well, business is the solution to everything. You just let business take care of everything, you know, and everything will just be hunky-dory. And neither of them are correct. So there has to be a new arrangement. That's the really what ought to be the key point to all of this thing, besides people first. There has to be a new arrangement. You can't just try to fix this, or, you know, redistribute money and say that, you know, we're going to take from the rich and we're going to give to the poor and keep the arrangement the same, because it's not going to work. Even if you did come up with some kind of solution like that, and you have kids and you're, you know, worried about your kids, the way it's been since the 1930s is that each generation takes care of this. You know, like the last guys that died, Reagan's dead, okay? So the next generation after that, it's their turn to take care of it. But the fact of the matter is that no one has done that. When Roosevelt died, the whole thing died. They got into this Cold War thing. We're going to nuke everybody. We're the most powerful nation in the world. We control everything, the strong dollar, the whole bit. I don't hear anybody coming up or even discussing any sort of alternative solutions to that. You know, they're saying that Obama is the same. He's no change. He doesn't do anything different. But all that the people are talking about right now, they're just bringing back the sort of Father Coughlin populism that was popular in the United States against Jews, that was pro-Hitler. And that's the danger I see in this sort of thing. And I've heard Republicans speak out about it. And they're just doing that, of course, because they you know, they want to get elected and they want to do things for their buddies in business and stuff like that. But still, it's a valid point. You know, just because the Republicans are a bunch of ruthless, psychopathic assholes doesn't mean that it's impossible for them to come up with some point that's valid. And that's one of the things that really, you know, you need some sort of people to have have a legitimate knowledge of these things. And you have to have some alternative other than this Keynesian system, as they call it, or this system of Milton Friedman with the supply side economics and the Republicans, because neither of those things work. And the supply